Good afternoon, and welcome to Tech, Bugs, and Rock and Roll, a weekly video live stream YouTube chat-based podcast media product about everything that's happening in the wonderful world of ones and zeros and putting them together in entertaining ways.
Yes, also known as just a bunch of colours and shapes and noises, unless you're just listening on a podcast, in which case just sounds, really.
Just sounds, and sounds don't really exist. Sounds are just pressure, so really it's all just waves.
Yeah.
I've been figuring out stuff with waves in the last week because I've been having to. Did we talk last week about debouncing things? We chatted about Arduinos briefly.
We chatted about Arduinos.
Yeah.
But I don't think
Debouncing is a tremendous amount of fun. When you press a switch, we like to think that we live in this beautiful, clear world of abstractions, but actually every layer of software development consists of the thing that you choose to believe because it allows you to do your job, and the thing holding it up that you don't look at in case it goes wrong and bites you and you get frightened. And the sort of fundamental, I have this idea slowly germinating about doing like a, have you ever seen the book From NAND Gates to Tetris, which is like a computer science primer that starts with NAND gates and gets as far as Tetris and explains how to build all the things. And I always thought it would be kind of fun to do like, part one is how do we turn bits into numbers, and part two is how do we turn numbers into text, and part three is how do we turn text into programs, and yada. And then right at the end you do part zero, which is that ones and zeros don't actually exist at all, because all we've got is waves. And the idea that when you flick a switch,
waves,
it goes from on to off. Well, actually, it's not on. It's sort of just bouncing along between a nominal pair of voltages that we've decided mean on. And when you switch it to off, what it does is the bounces get a little bit bigger until it kind of bounces backwards and forwards, and then they get a little bit smaller again at the other end of the spectrum. And in the middle, you go off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on a lot of times, which in analog circuits isn't a problem, because something like an analog light bulb can't actually get on or off that quickly. But when you're using an Arduino to decide whether you've pressed a switch or not, it gets really interesting. So that was fun. Actually, that also feeds in one of the other things that I've been playing around with this week is the wonderful world of feedback loops and how long it takes to find something that worked. Because you remember, like a couple of months ago, we were talking about NASA fixing Voyager 1 by like sending it a command and waiting 44 hours to get a reply.
Yes, the 2-day debug.
Yeah. Within the last week, I have had... So one, I've got an integration running against an API at the moment, which I'm not going to name and shame, but I'm absolutely certain that the people who built it read half of a book about OAuth that they found in a bin and implemented it based on their understanding and never looked for the second half of the book. Because it works for 4 hours, and then it stops. And it stops because the token it gives you expires after 4 hours. But I think they're expiring the whole thing. Like, I think they expire the refresh token as well as the access token, which is not how any of this is supposed to work. So, for folks who aren't familiar with it, there's this...
refresh token is the thing you're supposed to keep so you can get new access tokens.
Yes.
There's
this, so OAuth 2 was designed to solve this problem that validating credentials every time can get very expensive in a distributed system. So why don't we just give you a short-lived key that has an expiry date baked into it, and then you can decrypt that on client and, resource servers and be like, yeah, okay, no, that's out of date, whatever, and you have a shared key. But yeah, so that means I have a problem that only happens in production after 4 hours. I can't replicate it locally, so what I'm having to do is to log all the credentials on production. And the other frustrating thing is that the integration, when you restart the service, it works, and the only way to make it fail is to synchronize a transaction with this upstream API, and there aren't that many transactions. There's only 2 or 3 orders a day going through this thing. Right. So to get a single opportunity to try once to reproduce the problem, I have to wait 4 hours, and then wait for someone to buy something, and then pull the stuff out of the log, and then I get to run it once. And if it works, then I'm like, oh, all right, I guess it's gone away now. And if it doesn't work, then I get an error message which tells me what else I should try to capture next time to help me iterating on this thing. So that's one. But the other one I found is I actually have a feedback loop longer than the Voyager thing, because the little Arduino foot switch thing that I built, the way that it debounces is it takes the timestamp of when the switch got pressed. And the timestamp is, there's no clock on an Arduino, but you do have a how many milliseconds is it since it got switched on. And that overflows after 50 hours.
Yes. Okay.
So it's one of those little weird fun things. Like, I built this thing and I plugged it in, and I realized it was quite cool that I could wake my computer up by pressing a foot pedal, which is kind of neat, because you come in with, like, coffee and sandwich in your hands, and you tap the switch and it wakes up while you sit down. And then it stopped working, and I was like, oh, it only works for 50 hours. And after that, the debouncing logic. So
all I remember of debouncing, because debouncing is a term that you see in programming for kind of, if you're holding a key down, it stops the key from being sent repeatedly.
Yes.
And I just remember when I wrote a game in Unity with Ben.
Yeah.
And we did the Club Penguin C thing, and there were doors on the map, and you could, if the penguin was standing within that hitbox and you pressed the A button, then he went off and he played like Card Dojo or something. But there was, one of them was sled racing, and to start sled racing you had to press the button as well. And what would happen is you'd press the button to enter sled racing, and then it would still be pressed. And so when the scene started, it would catch the A button being pressed and start immediately.
Yeah.
And it took, I ended up downloading a third-party controller library thing, which included debouncing.
Yeah.
Just so I could get rid of that. So you could never, it had a thing where if you read the state of a button, then the next time you read it, it would definitely be off.
Yep.
Unless you would,
Yeah.
But, fun problems. Fun.
So as Stevens just said in the comments, when I learned about debouncing, it's a mechanical thing. The physical contacts literally bounce off each other, and they do.
Yeah.
If you take a switch apart and you look at what's inside it, there are metal bits of bendy metal that get pushed together or pulled apart, and when they make contact, they literally bounce. They dong, 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 dong.
And
so,
I think we, as programmers particularly, but everybody to a certain extent, we get confused by this because the world we live in feels so digital.
Yes.
That you forget that actually it's not, it's analog.
Yeah.
And things are vibrating and pulsing, and molecules are getting excited, and whatever else is going on.
There's a quote I always remember. Richard Feynman, the physicist, had this deconstruction where someone said, what's 2 + 2? And he said, well, 2 what and 2 what? And they said, well, what if I have 2 cats and 2 cats? And he said, well, how do you know they're cats? All right, if I have 2 animals and 2 animals, well, how do you know they're animal? All right, it gets to, if I have 2 entities and 2 entities, and he says, well, how are you defining an entity? Because, all of these abstractions, they're great for, doing arithmetic and algorithms and that kind of stuff. But the real world doesn't work like that. Ones and zeros are meaningless to human beings until you turn them into something we can actually comprehend. And the only way to do that is to turn them into waves, light waves or sound waves or pressure waves or something waves, or there must be some kind of smell and taste based interface that doesn't rely. Actually, even that would be electrical waves, wouldn't it?
It's
or some sort of.
So it's a chemical.
Yeah.
To electrical conversion on your taste buds and.
Yeah. So you could build an interface that didn't use waves if it was a thing you put on the back of your tongue that emitted molecules of different, flavors and whatever.
Yeah.
But no, the real world is messy and analog and full of waves and things that we decide are ones and zeros.
Yes.
Kevlin Henney had a lovely quote in a presentation I saw him do a while ago where, somebody is showing a bunch of algorithms from one of the famous, probably like Dijkstra's book, or Knuth, Donald Knuth, The Art of Computer Programming.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And it says, there's all these algorithms which have been mathematically proven to be correct because it doesn't occur to mathematicians that the number above 2 to the 16 plus 1 is actually negative. And you're like, yeah, I can see how that would be interesting.
Yeah.
So, anyway, what are we going to talk about this week?
Well, I want to talk about my thing that I've been working on, my actual job thing, because I have finally, I'm working with an API.
Yes.
And yesterday I finally got to the point where I could send something to the API and it would send something back, which took 8 weeks. Because it's a very weird API. It's not HTTP, it's not gRPC, it's not anything like that. It is AMQP.
Yeah.
It is literally a RabbitMQ queue sitting somewhere. And as far as I can tell, it is actually RabbitMQ specifically. And when you want to call the API, you send a request and then you give it a reply to thing. And then sometime later, it will send you a response. And the requests and the responses are all XML because this is an oldish type system. And for 8 weeks, I was the documentation for all of this that I had for the first 7.5 weeks was a single PDF file. And then they went, oh, you've got an out-of-date version of that PDF file. Here's a newer version of that PDF file. So then I got that one, and then it's still not working. And they went, that's very strange. Why is it not working? Can we jump on a call? And I don't know why it took 8 weeks to say, can we jump on a call? And then they were saying, well, I'm kind of like going, it doesn't work when I do this. And they say, have you done the bit it says in 3.2.4.2? And I'm kind of like, I haven't got a 3.4.2 whatever. And they go, oh, which version of the system are you working with? And I'm like, I don't know, the capacity thing. And they go, oh, you've got the other, you've got completely the wrong document. And so you're sending to completely the wrong set of queues and looking for other queues that don't exist and everything else. And so, literally yesterday they said, here's the actual document that you need. And 10 minutes later, I was kind of like, yay, I've got messages.
Can I ask you a question which has nothing to do with programming?
Go on then.
How have you been feeling when you got into week 6 of following the instructions and it not working?
Pretty frustrated. I invented quite a lot of things while I was waiting for them to give me actual access to the thing. So I now have literally allocation-free XML parsing. I've written my own XML parser that just uses read-only span of byte.
Yes.
And is 4 times faster than the built-in XML serializer and allocates literally no memory at all.
Wow.
Beyond what is necessary. It creates the object, but that's it. I've also written a thing that will, like a RabbitMQ proxy.
Yep.
So you can run the proxy server, and when you put a message onto it, it will relay that to the actual RabbitMQ thing. And then when it gets the response, it will relay that back to you. But it also takes a copy of every message that's sent and received, so that then you can spin up a RabbitMQ just with that list of everything that's been sent and received. So you don't have to rely on the crappy people with their crappy API and their crappy connectivity and everything. You can just recreate sessions just by recording them. So yes, and helping out with other stuff and going, oh no, don't do that. Oh, and a very big sort of like a 2-day evaluation of whether the best way to then expose these messages into the rest of the system was using iObservable or system.threading.channels. And I've ended up going with iObservable because reactive stuff is sometimes appropriate. So it's been an interesting first 2 months of a job.
There is often that feeling. So there are days when that experience makes me conclude instantly the system with which I am integrating here is not good enough and not up to standard, and it's a good thing they've got me. And there are days when the exact same set of circumstances would lead to, I am not clever enough to do this, they should have hired a different developer, I don't know what's going on, how difficult can it be? And it's very interesting how there's very little external kind of... Nothing about the nature of the work does that. It's all about which way your brain is when you wake up in the morning for me.
See, I never get that with the actual work.
No?
No. I'm very, very comfortable in my sort of ability to do things.
Yeah.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome comes from all the other stuff that we do.
Yeah.
The talks and that sort of thing. But yeah, the actual I vary between this is stressing me out, why won't this work? What's wrong somewhere? And the same thing, but I'm really angry about it and I'm breaking stuff.
That's See, I don't do that anymore. It's been a very long time since anything on a computer screen other than an email has made me physically angry and violent. An email can do that because there's human beings on the other end, and they suck worse than anything a computer system is capable of coming up with on a bad day. Yes. But no, I've been... I'm still working away on Rockstar 2. And yeah, and it's...
And making it support personal pronouns.
It's always supported pronouns. That's been a feature since day one.
There was something you were talking to Simon Painter about with...
Oh, he wants it to support I am, and I think that's a good idea. To the extent that I actually think that I am, like I and me, should be aliases for a single variable, and you and your... So yeah, I'm going to play around with that. But no, I decided to break the problem into two parts. So first of all, get it running on .NET as is. Yeah. And what I've discovered, there are some quirks. It is there's a bunch of things that were sort of hacked to work in this one. So there are points when the language syntax just has weird edge cases in it. And having to work out how those work to recreate support for them so that I can prove they work before I delete them... I am constantly kind of second-guessing myself, going, should I be doing this? Should I just throw it away and rewrite it from scratch again? Which I don't want to do, because I want to... There will be breaking changes, but I want to know exactly what they are and why they happened. I don't just want, like, oh yeah, that stopped working, I don't know why.
Yeah. This is one of those things where... you end up with code that's an absolute mess because you've just dragged it through every sort of set of testing and combinations and everything until you get it working. And then what you need to do is, once it's finished and it works properly, is throw it all away and write it again.
Yep.
And write it clean, which I've just done, actually, with my REA thing that I'm working on. And it's gone down by, I think about 2/3 of the code has just gone away because it was just leftovers from me figuring out how to do key-based or passphrase-based authentic encryption.
So Marie has commented, I got such a bad case of not believing in my abilities that I haven't gone back yet.
Oh, Marie!
That's sad. Come back. There's always stuff is solvable. It's just computers don't work and nobody's prepared to admit that, really. So, but no, there are definitely points where I'm staring at this and being like, am I clever enough to do this? Like, really? Yeah. And what I have definitely noticed in, over the last maybe 20 years is I don't know whether this is just that I'm more self-aware or anything. When I was 25, I'd just be like, yeah, I'll just write it and it'll be correct because I'm really good at computering. And I don't do that anymore. And I'm sure a little part of that is that I am not as, I'm not 25 years old anymore. And my brain is not quite as nimble as it used to be. But I've also, I can now ship code that I don't entirely understand, but I will be 100% confident that it works, because it's been engineered with tests and specifications around it, such that you're like, okay, I'll do that, and then I'll do that, and then, oh, look, everything has gone green. And, that's a weird shift, is having enough confidence in the process and the test coverage to be like, well, okay, I can't mentally predict all of the behavior and edge cases in this system, but I am confident that they are all covered by either a positive or a negative test, so I know the bits that are supposed to work, and I know that there's no sort of security vulnerabilities and things in it.
Simple Data was exactly like that. I had no idea how, by the time it was finished and some of the stuff it could do, I had no idea how Simple Data worked.
Simple Data
It had a huge test suite.
Projecting SQL data schemas into dynamic objects, wasn't it?
So the other way around. So yeah, you would use dynamic objects, and
so you could type like
a table name, and that was a column name, and that
database.customers, and it would be like, oh, you clearly mean select star from customers, and turn that into something.
But it ended up, because I was kind of competing with Dapper, and obviously I was never going to be as fast as Dapper because dynamic is a bit slow. But there were things like filling a child collection when it's doing mapping, and different ways of doing that. I mean, it supported bulk insert in SQL Server and Postgres as well, and that sort of thing. And it was just people going, "Can you make it do this?" And I would write a test of what it would look like if it did that. And because it was dynamic, the tests would always compile and run. And then, this was the first project that I used a very early version of NCrunch for it. At first I knew what was going on, but by the time it got to the end and I walked away and just went, no, I'm not doing it anymore.
One of the
absolute mystery.
Fun things that I've been doing. So I'm using NCrunch on Rockstar. Actually, the Rockstar 2 interpreter is called Starship because you have to name Rockstar interpreters after rock bands. And Starship have that famous line in We Built This City about someone's always changing corporation names, which I thought was a very apt choice for a .NET runtime feature. And so I've extended the error handling so that if you get an error, it will show you the line of the Rockstar code that failed the test. And I wanted this to be clickable. So I pinged Remco Mulder on the NCrunch forums. I'm like, hey, how does NCrunch decide if things are clickable? And he's like, doesn't. It just if they're clickable. And so I just reverse engineered the whole thing. And you have to output a new line followed by exactly 4 spaces, followed by a fully qualified path name, followed by exactly 1 space, followed by the word line, then a colon, and then a positive decimal number. Positive integer, if it detects that, it turns it into a clickable link.
Right.
But the other fun thing about NCrunch is that it will it copies everything into shadow folders because it doesn't mess with your project. It copies it all somewhere else, and that's where it does its build and runs it. So the file that blows up is not actually the one you're looking at. It's a copy of the one you're looking at in your C user's local app data somewhere. So there's now this convoluted logic to work out which file was the original version of the one that it found the failure in and translate that back. And then, the really fun part is that I needed to have a folder which was a subfolder of my .NET project, but was also a subfolder of a Jekyll website so I could host on GitHub Pages. Because the whole, like, each example in the documentation is going to be a program that exists on disk as a file and gets run as part of the continuous integration build. So even like a 2-line snippet, this is how you do Hello World in Rockstar, will get run as part of the checkout. So you don't end up with typos in the docs and that kind of thing. And so I was trying to figure out how to do this, and it just got into these, either the entire .NET project exists as a subfolder of a Jekyll site, which I have done with projects before, and it's a bit clunky, or the entire Jekyll site has to live inside the .NET project, which also is a bit clunky, or you just do it with a link, a symbolic link.
Yes, I was going to say symlinks.
Yeah, so I set it up with a symlink, and then I discovered that you can commit symlinks to GitHub, it doesn't mind. But a lot of GitHub tooling just cannot cope with a file which is a symbolic link, with a folder that's a symbolic link to another folder. It tries to open it. It's like, I don't know what happened. I asked file system to show me what's in there. And So Git Kraken, there are certain things now I know I shouldn't click on. Because if I do, it's going to get a little bit upset. But
you shouldn't use Git Kraken. You should learn to use the command line.
I do use the command line, but I also use Git Kraken because I enjoy the command line very much for anything where I know what I'm doing. And if I need to actually look at what's changed, then GUI every time because clicking things is easy.
See, I haven't used Git Kraken for a while. I don't think I've ever had it on this computer, and this computer's about 4 years old. But I do remember the last time I did have Git Kraken, it made my fans really loud. Because I think it was an Electron application.
Everything's Electron.
Everything's an Electron application.
Yeah.
But, it was an insanely complicated Electron application that was attempting to do far more than JavaScript ever should.
Yeah.
And it was quite struggly. I expect it's got better now. I expect they're using WASM and things to improve it.
Don't think so.
No, it's still noisy with the fans.
No. I think the performance. So Electron stuff. So Electron's basically like, let's build a web app and then make it pretend it's a local native app. Yes. And so VS Code is Electron, which is how it looks the same on Mac OS and Linux and Windows. And Git Kraken looks the same, and Slack is an Electron app, isn't it? Basically anything that looks the same on 3 major operating systems is almost certainly Electron. And I think that what happened is that just the Electron runtime itself has got a lot better, because I cannot believe that all of the people relying on it have all been improving the performance of their application at the same rate. I think it must be some ecosystem improvement that's delivered those. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean about the fans. And it doesn't happen anything like as much as it used to. So, although I don't have any fans, my computer is fanless. It's got one that I switch on when I'm playing Baldur's Gate, but apart from that, it's completely silent. So
your PC doesn't have any fans.
It's passive cooled. It's got fans on the GPU, which get spun up when you're doing intensive graphicsy stuff.
Baldur's Gating.
Yeah. But other than that, it's passive cooled. It's just got a massive heatsink on the processor, and it works. And because I didn't want fan noise on audio recordings, so I talked to the people from quietpc.com.
Totally see
and
that.
went, can I have a computer that doesn't make any noise? And they went, yeah, we can sell you one of those. And they did.
Cool.
So, yeah, it's neat.
So, so that's like half an hour of not talking about any of the stuff on the list. But no, so one of the things I wanted to talk about was your Wordle video.
Oh, yes.
Came out a couple of days ago. Where you investigated the economics.
Yeah. So that what I do with those
to charge $1 for it.
Yeah. What I do with those YouTube videos quite a lot is I have lots of talks that are an hour, 40 minutes, an hour long. And they're all on YouTube, but they're all on other people's channels. And most of them, there are little bits that would lend themselves to being a snippet. Yes. And I kind of got the idea. The folks from GoTo did a really good job of turning bits of presentations into little TikTok type videos. Yes. And I think that's too short. Like, I think 1 minute is not really long enough to do anything meaningful. But I thought, about a sort of between 5 and 10 minutes is a nice format to do something every week. I had this talk about evolving digital societies and, dependencies on centralization. And one of the things that I talk about in that was Wordle and the economics of it. And and I go through the what if Wordle wanted to be a non-profit. What if Josh Wardle had wanted to charge just enough money? Because Wordle, when it first came out, cost $0.0002 to serve to one person, and then they could play it for 7 years, and that's what made it interesting for me.
Yes, but because you were digging into, okay, so if you want it to cover its own costs, then you need to get people to pay for it.
Yeah.
But it costs 0.00002 pence per person, and you can't send people an invoice, and so unless you said buy a 10-year thing and that'll be 2 cents, And yeah, so then you sort of go, all right, well, we'll charge $1, and then the payment people will take this much, and then that's 67 cents. But now you've got to deal with all this money coming from all these people, so you need an accountant and this and that and the other. And it just reminded me of, there's a South Park episode, which I thought coined the term Cartmanomics.
So Mark put this on the Trello board this morning, and I googled Cartmanomics and couldn't find anything anywhere. And it just kept going, did you mean Cartman Comics? Are you sure you weren't looking for Cartman Comics?
Cartmanomics. So Cartman inherits $1 million from an uncle and buys the local theme park, which is struggling. And so he manages to get the guy to sell it to him for $1 million.
Yeah.
And then it's just his theme park, and only he is allowed in there. But then people are climbing over the fence to get in. And so he has to hire a security guard. And the security guard's going, how much are you going to pay me? And he says, well, you can go on any of the rides for free. And he's like, I need to pay my rent and buy food and things. And so Cartman goes, all right, I'll let 3 people in every day and then use the money from them to pay you. But then because he's letting 3... Then a ride breaks, and so he has to hire a maintenance person, and so he has to let another 4 people in per day, and then that's becoming too difficult, so then he has to hire a person to work on the ticket stand. And so it's a combination of these things where he has to turn it back into a full-blown business, but also because he's been saying that only 7 people or only 10 people or whatever can come in, he's made it insanely popular, and everyone desperately wants to go there. And I think because this is a very early episode, this is from about 20 years ago, and I think they were satirizing the tendency at the time, like Google Gmail.
Yeah.
For a very long time, for months and months, was only available as beta. And it was one of those things where if you were lucky enough to get in, then every now and then they'd give you 2 invitations. So you could invite 2 more people. And I got in really early. I can't remember who it was. I knew somebody who worked at Google, and they sent me an invitation. So my Gmail address,
Season 5, Episode 6.
Season 5, Episode 6. Yes, that was the one. It is one of the better episodes. But yes, I have my email address, my Gmail address is rendell@gmail.com, which also has some interesting side effects, because I think people, they forget to put the dot when they type their email address.
Yeah.
And so like michael.rendell@gmail.com, I have access to your PayPal.
So I have... Dylan Beatty is not a common name, but there are a fair few of them about. There is somebody on Instagram who has the handle memesbra1, who's been trying to get back into their account since April, but every time they put in... Well, they put in my Gmail address without the dot, but dots don't matter on Gmail. And so I get their password reminder. And the really frustrating thing is there is a link at the bottom of that saying, if this isn't your email address, click here to tell Instagram that there's been a problem. And that doesn't work. That's a 405 method not allowed if you click on that. So, and, it's got to the point now, I also occasionally get... Like, the frustrating thing with these people is, like, I've got one now, I know where they live, because I've got their invoices with their home delivery address. And so I could send them a postcard going, you're an idiot, and you keep getting your email address wrong, and sort it out. But I don't think, like... And I wonder what their experience of, like, being a digital citizen is like if they keep typing their own email address into stuff wrong. They're like, they're going, stupid internet doesn't work, I never get the email, and I can't get into Instagram. And I'm like, okay, this is clearly not for you. But, so Cartmanomics.
Cartmanomics. Yeah, there you go. And then the other thing, which I want to know, so Samsung had their big unpacked, or whatever they call it, in France a couple of days ago. And there were 2 things that came out of that for me. One is there's much less focus on the Galaxy S S24 or whatever it is. It's kind of like, yeah, there's a Galaxy S24, but look over here, and they've got the Z Fold and the Z Flip, the two folding phones. And it's kind of, I mean, the Z Fold, the one that sort of is a normal size phone that then folds out into a tablety looking thing. I know people who've got them and say they're great.
Yeah.
But I'm still looking at them and going, are you ready though?
Yeah.
Are you actually? And I think in my head, what's happening is I'm looking at folding phones and I'm going, they can't be ready. It is logically not possible that they are ready, because if they were ready, Apple would be making them.
Yes.
Because Apple don't make things until they're ready, with the exception of the Vision Pro. And the Vision Pro is like a whole other thing.
Yeah, I mean, the Vision Pro, this is I've been saying to people for a while, and I think Apple got this wrong, and consequently I got it wrong as well, saying augmented reality is going to be a gimmick until Apple make one.
Yeah.
And I think the Vision Pro is right. It's a rare case of Apple. Have you tried one? Have you actually tried one out?
I haven't put one on. No,
yeah.
Not yet.
They are remarkable.
Yeah.
In the sense of immersion that they give you is better than anything I have ever tried before. But I had absolutely no desire after trying one out to go out and buy one. Or, I was like, this is great. I literally can't think of anything, like all the things you could do with it. Like, it'd be great for watching movies on a plane. But then you have to take a headset on a plane. And this is not something you can fold up and put in a pocket, This is luggage. And I think that's the tipping point, is it needs to be, a third the price and a fifth of the size.
Yeah.
But
at the moment where we are with augmented reality, it's like those people who make hoverboards with superconductors, and they sort of create like a 1 meter square, very, very, very cold surface, and then they've got a hoverboard that works on top of it, and you can stand on it and it still hovers, and you're kind of like, yes, it's a hoverboard, but it's not something that you're going to be grabbing hold of a car and surfing down the street on anytime soon. And that feels like where we're at with quite a lot of things. I think folding phones were about there. I think virtual reality maybe, but augmented reality definitely. Augmented reality needs to be at most like a pair of Oakley skiing shades, running shades. Something, it can be a bit bulkier than just normal glasses, but it needs to be that small.
It is hard to avoid the conclusion that everyone is wasting time with AI when they should be building stuff anybody actually wants for anything.
And that's the other thing, is AI. So literally just before we started, I saw something saying that some people at Purdue University gave a series of kind of basic programming, or like whatever, I don't know how difficult the questions were, but programming questions to the best coding assistant out there. And it got 52% of them wrong. And that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But also, compared to where we were 2 years ago, that's pretty good. Actually, we've got AI that can answer nearly half the questions in a programming test correctly.
Yeah.
And so, it's this really weird, like, schizophrenic place to be in, where you're kind of going, it's awesome, but it sucks.
It's not awesome.
We can't use it.
It is.
It's amazing how far it's come, but it's even more amazing how far it's still got to go before I'm going to be happy phoning a number and saying, yes, I've got a headache, and have an AI tell me that I should probably use like sodium suppositories or something. Yeah.
I still, every single application of it that I've seen, it's occasionally useful. There are odd things where I will be like, I need to be stuck for a good 10 minutes before I will resort to using ChatGPT. And I switch Copilot off completely because it just gets in the way. It does not get what I'm trying to do. It keeps suggesting the wrong thing, and it's, I am less productive using it.
Yeah.
And, the whole, like, oh, here's the answer to your question, and then in the small print, answers may be inaccurate. You should check them. I'm like, we need an AI that can be like, I don't know. We need an AI that's like, I don't actually have an answer to that question. I don't know that. I can't do that.
Do you remember those AIs that would do 20 questions?
Yeah.
And if they didn't get your thing that you were thinking of within 20 questions, they would say, what question could I have asked?
Yeah.
And they actually learned.
Yeah.
Whereas these LLMs, once you start talking to them, they've pretty much stopped learning, as I understand it. They've kind of built this huge, great thing, which they've trained using enough power to run a small city for a week.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of talk to a bunch of statistics. Until they can get to a point where they can keep learning and all this sort of stuff. And it's this thing, they keep going on about bigger context windows.
Yeah.
Like that's going to solve the problem.
Well, I mean, the energy and hardware cost of doing that is just absolutely prohibitive. And you're like, can we just stop? Can we please put all of the smart people and all of the money and all of the fuel and all of the hardware and the GPUs and everything? Can we do something else with them for a bit? And then in 5 years, we can come back and do another 6 months of how good is AI now.
Yes.
And, I
completely reasonable position.
Yeah.
Just have
we'll check in every once in a while. And, it's... I know people who have a lot of fun with it, but I really don't see any appeal.
No.
Whatsoever.
No, the only thing I've used in programming terms, and I haven't used it for anything else, I don't think. Once I can talk to it in my house, I think I'll use it more.
Yeah.
But the only thing I've used it for so far where I was kind of like, okay, now that was quite clever, was copying some decompiled machine code out of SharpLab or something like that, and then pasting it into ChatGPT and going, what does this do? And then getting it to break down line by line what each of the instructions is doing, and the MOVs and the JLEs and all this sort of thing. And it explained that very well, and as far as I could tell, it was right.
Yeah.
But yeah, apart from that, I've not used it to write code. I've not used it to review code. I've not used it to write pull requests, descriptions. It's just, I would spend more time, I think, trying to decide which one to use than it would take just to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. It's kind of... Because, it was GPT 4.0 for a while, but now apparently it's Anthropic Claude 3.5 that's winning, and there's all these people with their benchmarks and their tests, and every time someone releases a new model, they run it through the benchmarks, and you're just kind of like, just stop.
Yeah. So, I mean, Marie's comment about the training data is getting so polluted by generated data. We were talking a couple of weeks ago about Tim O'Reilly. I was talking with Kevlin, actually. Tim O'Reilly's he wrote an essay about attribution, and he said, well, why don't we just train models on stuff we know is good because it's in published copyrighted books that have actually been written by humans, and then one, we'll know that it's not, getting high on its own supply, and two, we can actually work out which people contributed to which bits of result, and so if that result is worth money, we can make sure the authors get their royalties and their revenue. It's a very smart man, Tim O'Reilly.
He is.
A lot of time for his perspective on these kinds of things.
I will be anticipating the launch of O'Reilly's Safari AI. See what I did there. And the other thing that came out of the Samsung event was apparently they've made the first smart ring that actually works. And I don't know what that means, because I don't know what smart rings are for.
So I've been looking at... So my biggest frustration with smartwatches, I have a Fitbit Versa 3. It is simultaneously a very, very useful device and an absolutely awful wristwatch. It does... so about 4 times a day it crashes. So when it crashes, it does a little reboot. And the little reboot takes about 3.5 minutes. And while it's rebooting, it stops ticking. But then it doesn't tell you it rebooted. So I frequently, in 2024, have a wristwatch that was accurate at 9 a.m. and is running 15 minutes slow by the end of the day.
Because it's rebooted.
And it about 10 times a day, it just randomly goes, oh, something went wrong, but it might work if you try again. And I enjoy I like having the biometric data and the heart rate and the sleep monitoring and all those kinds of things. I don't use any of the notification capabilities of this thing. It's basically just a thing strapped onto my body to measure what my body is doing and then put that in an app where I can look at it. Yes. So it doesn't need a screen. And so a smart ring is like a smartwatch that you put on your finger. And so it measures your pulse and, your heart rate and your blood oxygenation and all that kind of stuff. But it's not a watch, which means you can wear your smart ring, and then you can wear your Casio F94W, which did not end up 15 minutes slow every working day. In fact, I once dug one up in the garden, and it was still accurate. It must have been in there for 5 years. I was like, yeah, they did not mess about when they made the Casio F91W. So
see, I have a proper smartwatch.
Yeah.
From Apple.
Yeah.
And because having spent years in the wilderness as an Android user, I finally just went, never mind. Let's just get an iPhone, and then I can get an Apple Watch and stuff. And I really like it. It's a lovely watch. Yeah. The battery lasts all day, and it's fine. But I don't use the health things particularly. Yeah. It's kind of like a 10 to the hour.
Yeah.
If you haven't stood up for a while, it'll say it's time to stand up, and if you do that enough times, then you close your stand circle and all those sorts of things. But whenever quite a lot of the time, I'll just be sitting watching a movie, and it will say your heart rate just went above 120 for most of a 10-minute period, and you don't appear to be doing anything. And I'm kind of like, yes. And what do you want me to do about it?
My proudest moment.
I don't want to know the stats on how unhealthy I am.
My proudest moment with my Fitbit was when I used to have it every time I got 10,000 steps, it would do like a little yay. And I once got my 10,000th step, quote unquote, by reaching onto my coffee table to get another piece of fried chicken out of a cardboard bucket that I was eating by myself. And it went, you just got 10,000 steps. And I'm like, yeah. Peter says, I was watching a video about F91W fakes. I guess it's worthwhile. I mean, I've got a fake Logitech PowerPoint clicker that I bought on Amazon, and I got a counterfeit one delivered that's clearly not a real Logitech product. And I guess anything that people buy, somebody out there is like, let's make a bunch of fake ones.
Yes.
Which I find simultaneously like baffling and also quite easy to believe. It's like it's
so a lot of the time the fake ones are actually exactly the same because they've come off the same production line as the real ones. It's just that the Chinese factory that's built all the tooling to make Casio F91Ws goes, well, they're only running these machines for like 2 hours a day for Casio. so we could make 22 times as many, or 12 times as many fake ones, and then just give them to our mates in the weird markets and Alibaba and AliExpress or whatever, and make more money that way. It looks fake, but technically it's probably exactly the same thing. It just doesn't say Casio on it, and you probably don't get the 1-year warranty. But
Right. There are two things we need to talk about, albeit briefly, because we put them in the title of the episode. Yes. So one of them, I've been listening to Tidal a lot. We did smart rings.
Yeah.
Drumless Daft Punk.
I listened to the whole thing.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
It is, but it's so weird.
So Daft Punk have actually this came out last year, but I only found out about it this week. They released a drumless version of Random Access Memories, which is the entire album with the drums removed. It's not, it's a remix in the sense that one track has been taken out. It's not a remaster. They're not alternative lyrics or arrangements or anything. It's just the entire album without drums. And it's very, very strange and really interesting if you're into music and music production to kind of, see how everything else fits together and how tight the rhythm programming and the performances on that are. It's astonishing. And I know that there's some. So I know in the Far East, it's quite normal for like established bands will release the karaoke version of their single at the same time as the real one.
Yes.
And it'll be the same musicians in the same studio, just with the vocal tracks removed, because karaoke is such a big cultural phenomenon over there. But yeah, I think this is the first time I've seen a band release a drumless album. And because I play drums, kind of put that on and see if you can keep up. And it's kind of fun.
Well,
and
I was
like
wondering
that.
if that was kind of part of the reason for it. But the other thing that I noticed, and this is kind of as a newer musician and also as a bassist, is if you take away the drums, but you've got a really good solid bass line, it kind of does the same job.
Yeah.
And it's like taking the drums away lets you hear the bass line that previously was just augmenting the drum track.
Yeah.
And so that's quite nice. The other really weird thing was the Giorgio by Moroder.
Yeah.
That on the original has a click track. They've just left the click track in.
Yeah.
And they took the click track off. And it sounds so wrong without the click track. That was just like such an iconic part of that song. And I think that was one of the single releases off the album as well. But no, it is. I mean, it's definitely worth listening to right the way through once. And the other thing that it sounded like to me, or that it reminded me of, it didn't sound like them, but it reminded me of them, is what to call this so that I can still tick the box that says no profanity when I upload this to Spotify. Fork Buttons, who are a Canadian noise, or were a Canadian noise house thing. They make music that's just different analog synth noises all layered over each other. And beats kind of emerge from the interaction between the sound waves and stuff. But there is no drum, there's no percussion in it. But it's still very rhythmic and everything. And it sounded a lot like that. Tarot Sport is the best album to start with by the Fork Buttons. I use it a lot for coding music because no vocals. It is just the ultimate in really nice background noise. So and then the other thing that we had on the title here is I was completely startled by this. Ford are bringing back the Capri name.
Now, some of our international listeners may not be familiar with the Ford Capri.
No.
The Ford Capri was a 1970s performance car made by Ford in the UK that just looked and sounded ridiculous. It was the daftest car I think I have ever seen, and I've seen a lot of daft cars. One of my actually, there was I was going to say one of my old housemates used to have one. About 3 of my old housemates used to have the same one, not at the same time. Like they kept selling it to each other.
Oh, right, yeah.
And someone would drive it for a couple of months and then be like, this is a stupid car. And then they'd sell it to somebody else. And if you put it in neutral and put your foot down, the whole car would rock sideways because the engine revving would actually tilt it off to the side.
Yes, because the engine, I think it was transverse mounted.
Yes.
Yeah, because it was front-wheel drive.
Yes.
And that was how they used to do front-wheel drive.
Yes.
Back in the day. No, my stepbrother had one when I was about 10, 11 years old. And I had much older stepbrothers. And he had the 2.8 litre fuel injection, the sort of top-end one. And it was a completely ridiculous thing. That was kind of like sticking a jet engine to a Cessna 150. Yeah. And expecting it not to fall apart when you push the pedal down. But no, they brought it back. And so the 70s, 80s thing, they were very specifically two-door with kind of one of the same kind of back seats that Porsche 911s have. It's technically a back seat, but you wouldn't want to put anyone other than a cat in there.
Yes.
And low to the ground and, very sports car pretending to be and all that sort of thing. And so they've brought it back as a crossover SUV electric vehicle that doesn't actually look that different from the Mustang, which is they've also done this with. Although I think this is going to be about 10,000 cheaper than the Mustang. off the forecourt. But no. So yes, in the comments, what other car brands from Gen X childhoods should those companies bring back as?
I mean, the electric DeLorean cars has been in the works for a long while.
Yes.
And I'm kind of like, that's the right thing to do with something like the DeLorean. I've seen the electric Volkswagen bus, like the electric camper there, which, yeah, okay, nice idea. I kind of like that. That was always, and like an electric Beetle would be a fun car. But yeah, there's got to be so many iconic old cars that just somebody's like, we need to bring out another new, just don't make them all hybrid electric SUVs. They're so dull.
But, I just want, if you're just bringing back the name and you're not having to be faithful to what the original car was, then let's have like an electric minivan called a Trabant. And then you too can do a re-release of the album that had a picture of a Trabant on the cover.
Was that Zooropa?
I think so. Yeah.
That amazing stage set with all the bits of consumer hardware built up behind them in a massive wall. So
yes. Okay. Yes. So any ideas? Then stick them in the comments, and we'll read those next week.
Now, there's a ticket you dropped in here, which I want to talk about just because it's interesting, which is the guitar and bass lines on Eminem's "My Name Is" were played by Chaz and Dave.
Yes, Chaz and Dave. Again, for our overseas listeners, viewers, how to explain Chaz and Dave?
Chaz and Dave invented a style of music called Rockney, which is Cockney rock and roll. They were a couple of, sort of jobbing session musicians in the 50s and 60s who turned around one day and went, we're sick of singing in fake American accents to try and sell records. We're going to sing like we do. And, had a lot of songs.
Before they did that, they were like prolific session musicians, and one of the recordings that they played on was Labby Sifri. I Got and that they played guitar and bass on that record, and that record has been sampled a lot.
Yeah,
but most famously by Eminem for "My Name Is," and so yes, I just thought that was brilliant. That the bass line on this incredibly 2000s modern rap sort of I don't know what Eminem is. Is he East Coast or West Coast? He's West Coast, isn't he? But anyway,
I thought he was from Detroit.
Oh well, yes.
Which is Middle Coast.
That's Middle Coast. Okay, so he's non. But yes, he sampled this thing where the bass was being played by Dave and the guitar was being played by Chaz, and these are the same guys who did Rabbit, Rabbit, yep, Rabbit, Rabbit.
My all-time favourite song of theirs is a song they wrote called Margate, which is about going on a day trip to Margate on a coach, and the video for that is the most English thing. Like, there's a certain, like, you can look at Englishness from two perspectives, and one perspective is sort of Pink Floyd and Cool Britannia and, the thrust supersonic car and all this kind of stuff. And the other one is a bunch of people getting on a knackered old bus to go to Margate for a day trip and eating a pint of jellied eels.
Yes.
And
the other one's
Margate,
basically.
Yeah, and Margate captures that perfectly, and it's just an absolute delight.
No, it isn't. So
all right.
That was fun finding that thing out. And then just one more thing that I wanted to squeeze in there, because my dog's been going to the vets, and then you get a prescription with the sort of typed out sticker on it, which has got your dog's name on there, and your dog has your surname.
Yeah.
Because I guess, they need to differentiate somehow. But so my dog is apparently called Rosie Rendell. Which is new. Is your cat?
So Mac is Claire's cat. So, but when Mac is naughty, he's Mac Beatty.
Right, okay.
Because I definitely have some sort of paternal responsibility for when he's just destroyed something with extreme prejudice.
Yes.
So, but one of my favorite things is cat Twitter. And there are cats with sensible cat names like Fluffy and Pickle and all that, and then there are cats with names like Jeffrey Parker, and then there are the cats whose names are like, there's a cat named what is it? So it's called Lowe's Parking Lot or something, because that's where it was found. And Deli Department, and just these wonderfully offbeat names. You're like, is that? I guess you can call a cat anything. And it gets towards Ian Banks' culture ship names. Like, these are our three cats, Muffin, Pickles, and of course we've considered the consequences.
Yes.
Which I rather like, but
yes. So
yeah.
When I am in my own place and the dog has gone with my ex-wife, I think I will probably get a cat. And I think what I would quite like to do is get a black cat and call it the Darkness.
Yes.
Because I think I think that's the kind of names that cats call themselves. And I think I would be sort of going, I'm going to give you a name that I think you would approve of. You are the Darkness. And
will your cat believe in a thing called love?
Yes. Yeah. And, maybe it'll do me a Christmas album.
Maybe. That'll be fun. We got to do a Line Breakers Christmas thing. Oh, we should mention that. That's this week. Yes.
Yes.
On the 16th, which will be Tuesday. The Line Breakers. 16 at 16, except I made it 16 British summertime because I used the defaults in YouTube and it localized everything. It should have been 16 UTC. But yeah, we decided 16 is a good number. So 16/16 on the 16th of each month, we're going to drop a new Line Breakers video on our YouTube channel. And the first one will be there, next week. So like and subscribe, as the cool kids say.
I have been polishing the heck out of we're going to build a framework.
Sweet.
Things had got a bit loose and rough and ready and stuff, and I'm just trying to get back to the precision and the sort of 16th beats and all that kind of thing. And then I will record my part of that this weekend.
Sweet.
And then get on to learning the bass line from Loser by Beck for a secret song that we haven't done yet.
Yes.
Yes.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So, anyway, folks, that's an hour from us. Time to wrap it up. Thank you so much for tuning in, chat. Yes.
Do you know there are people who turn up sort of 10 minutes late and apologize for being late?
I know. It's not a meeting. It's fine.
It's not a meeting. You don't have to be here. You're not going to get docked any wages unless the people you actually work for find out you've been watching us.
The thing that I quite enjoy when I'm doing, because I do code streams on Twitch and YouTube, and people will join 15 minutes late, rewind to the beginning, and then leave comments. And it's like, oh, did you just comment on something that we did 15 minutes ago and we've all moved on a lot since then?
Yes.
Which I'm sure there must be a way of disabling that and being like, you actually have to watch this live. You don't want, you watch it live or you watch it tomorrow. Anyway. Thank you for tuning in, folks. Lovely to see you all, as always. And you'll have a good week, and we will catch you same place, same time next week.
Yeah. All right. Have fun. Bye.